Okay. Well, I think I just did the world's worst music fade into nothing, and we are live. Our first
Hey,
podcast,
right on.
Dad Schooled podcast. I will work on the intro so it's not terrible next time.
This was phenomenal as much as I could have ever anticipated. Thank you.
Also, we're not streaming on X because there's a problem with multicasting. Apparently, you got to pay premium to do that.
Mm.
So we're just streaming on YouTube right now, and we'll upload things to all the correct podcasts later on. But this is our very first show. Thanks for joining us. My name's Josh,
I'm
and
Jimmy. Yeah.
that's Jimmy. We are two homeschool dads. Um, we are not the same homeschool dads, not the same family. We're not like that.
No.
Uh,
Different. Yeah, we are in different homes, different
different
families.
homes. Yes, my office looks like this. His office looks like that.
This is
Um,
predominantly my wife's office. It's gorgeous.
I was gonna say it looks very manly behind you.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Uh, but my wife does the majority of our homeschooling. Actually, she does all the homeschooling. I kind of make bad jokes and intersect and, uh, yeah, add my little tidbits every now and then. But she does all the teaching. And Jimmy, you want to tell us about your arrangement?
I this year we transitioned to where I am predominantly doing most of the homeschooling in our home. We have always been a homeschool family. Started when our oldest, who's now 13, when she was hitting kindergarten, we immediately started homeschool way back in the day, and it was more my wife leading the things in the home while I was in the workspace, and currently it's set up where I've got my 13-year-old and a cohort of other seventh grade kids once a week in our co-op. So I'm doing all the lesson planning and putting things together for our once a week meetings, and then handling a lot of the other stuff here in the house too. So it's quite an adjustment, but man, it's an incredible journey.
Definitely. Yeah, we've been homeschooling. My wife's gonna yell at me later because I'm not gonna remember the dates, but basically, I think kindergarten as of 13 years ago, not 13 years. My oldest son is 13, so whenever he did kindergarten, that's when we started homeschooling.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna get blasted for that later. So how this podcast come to be? I mean, what made us think to do a podcast?
I mean, we first even got to know each other. We ran into each other at a homeschool convention in Branson, Missouri, since we're both Missouri families and wound up down there and saw each other in a class. We're like, hey, I think I know you from church, and just started to get to chat and get to know each other, and found out our interests, our passions of not only having our kids have a strong educational opportunity and experience, but being involved dads and husbands in our home, but also in other arenas in our community, in our churches as well, and having an influence and then teaching our children what that influence looks like and how to impact others in our daily life. And we're like, you know what? We can't just reserve these conversations just for us and only bless ourselves. We need to share this. So,
I mean,
so we're
I
we're throwing it up online.
I think like the start of all this, we just like, hey, let's get together, have coffee,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then we had a couple early mornings of coffee, and
Mhm.
then I believe I was listening to some podcasts on the way home from a family trip we took to Washington D.C., and I was like, man, Jimmy and I could do this. We could at least entertain ourselves for a good hour a week, probably,
Yeah,
and in essence, I think I just wanted more friends to
right.
be around me. So I forced Jimmy into this, and we are now officially podcasters, I guess, after today.
Officially, yeah.
Officially.
I'm fully American. I have a podcast. That's like the new thing, right?
Was it a Cadillac in every driveway and everyone has a podcast?
And everyone's got a podcast.
American Dream. So speaking of American dreams, actually let's back up. What we kind of covered this a little bit already, but what are we going to do in this podcast? What's the goals, you think?
Yeah, I think those goals are. I know I want to make sure we're bringing authenticity to the conversation. I feel so much of anything that is in the online space these days, these years, everything's through a filter. Everything is, I mean, as much as we have our script, ahead of time of what we're going to be going over, everything is scripted, everything's filtered. There's just not much authenticity. And so I want to make sure that we're bringing just our true selves of our beliefs, where we are, again, as husbands and fathers, but something that's just an accessible conversation of two guys just riffing off each other, and who knows where the journey is going to take us, but grounded in truth and scripture, our faith in Christ, and our desire to see that next generation. That there were families here before us. We're a product of who we were taught and raised into being, and that's the journey we're in right now, is bringing that next generation up after us. One of these days, me and you, we're going to be gone. And people who are listening to us right now, we're going to be gone. There's our country, our way of life, our churches are going to be left in someone else's hands, and it's an important task to put that weight on your shoulders and make sure we're passing this off the best way that we think we know how.
Hey, that can be scary too, thinking about like just walking down the street and seeing what kind of society we have. They're going to be leaders,
right? Yeah.
So
someone's going to lead, and
yes.
we want to try to stack the deck in a way that puts forth integrity and strong ethics, and a Christian ethos is where our hearts are. And this little bit of time that we get to share together online is a little piece of that pie going out there.
Yes. And I know I'm not the primary homeschooler in my household, but even those other dads out there that might be listening to us in the future or now in a replay, and it's because your wife sent them a link and said, listen to these guys. I want to let you know that even though
they would do that, but
yeah, I mean, wives don't ever just tell us to do things, right?
Oh, no.
But I want to be an encouragement to you who are not involved always at the heart of homeschooling, but you definitely have a large impact in the way your kids learn and how your wife is able to teach. You got to support your wife and be there for your kids and be the example for your kids you're supposed to be as a Christian man of your household. Also, I hope to bring some jokes to this podcast. Like, that's just my personality. I will not be serious most of the time, and most of my jokes are terrible. So just warning everyone ahead of time.
You're scaring everyone off already.
Yeah. I mean, Jimmy's going to be the source of a lot of good information, and I will be the source of some questionable information.
Words Maybe. Will come from the mouth. We'll see what the value of them are.
All right. So a good segue into value. Did you see the inauguration?
We did.
President
Trump.
That
up. Yeah, I pulled that up the other morning, and that was just a great opportunity of, it happens every 4 years. And it's something that we get to sit down and observe a transfer of leadership, and we get to hear what the next, leader of our country put their thoughts out there of how they want to lead things, what direction they want to take things in this next chapter of our country's history, and it's going to have an impact on each of our lives. And so getting to sit down, we've got a 13-year-old and a 8-year-old. So obviously one of them was a little more engaged than the other and interested in what was going on. But these are the things that you want to take that opportunity to allow visibility. We don't have screens on a whole lot in our house, and we're a little more picky of what we spend our time being entertained by. But this is something that, we want to take that time. We want to observe. We want to have those thoughtful conversations and be available for answering questions. And we had some really good conversations. We had some really good, I was impressed with, for being 13 years old. I don't think I was as observant of what was going on and the things that were being said, and bringing the types of quality questions that my teenager was bringing, and it was a really really good time. We enjoyed getting to dig into that a little bit together.
Yeah, I was just bumming around online and realized, hey, this is on right now. So I rushed upstairs, and we have a TV in our kitchen that my wife uses to show World Watch News every day and lunchtime. World Watch News is I'm gonna butcher this too, but it's a I think Christian faith based news broadcast. It's unbiased as you can be, and they
Mhm.
provide a worldly exposure to things happening all over the world. It's they have really cool updates about things in other countries, and it's not the negative media spin you see nowadays.
Yeah,
But all that aside, that's what the TV's there. It's not for watching cartoons while we eat breakfast, even though I would love to do that sometimes.
it does
Um,
happen from time to time. Yeah.
yeah. But I rushed upstairs and I put it on, and I was able to sit there. I cooked breakfast, and we watched. The kids, I mean, they could have been more attentive, but I'll give it to them. But my kids, I have let's see, a 6-year-old son, twin 11-year-old daughters, and then a 13-year-old son. And the older ones were asking some questions. Who's this? Who's that? Um, whose hat is that? Talking about Melania's hat. So it was a fun time, and then
Yeah.
it petered off, and their interest went away, and they didn't care about the long speeches. But it was fun for my wife and I. We sat there and watched because we are now of the age old that we sit and watch these things, and we are interested in politics. So
And I did see, I was impressed with how quickly I did see your family updated your maps in your schoolroom.
yes, yeah. My wife has a homeschool blog, and Blessed Homeschool, I believe. Oh man, I should have had that ready.
No,
I'm gonna get killed. Um, yeah, but she has a YouTube channel, so look her up. Even though I didn't give you any information, but we'll figure that out later. It'll be in the description possibly. But yeah, she has a great thing. We updated our map to be Gulf of America instead of Gulf of Mexico, so it's pretty fun. I was hoping to go like millions of people viral. It didn't, but
it didn't.
when
No,
this video goes viral, then that one probably will.
everyone will go look that one up,
Yeah.
even though we didn't give the description of where to go.
Good luck finding it. All right, so the main topic today. Oop, did I lose you, Jimmy? I think I just lost you. Well, that's unfortunate. Hopefully, he'll jump back on. There he is.
Hey,
You hit the button you shouldn't hit. What'd you do?
I didn't touch anything.
He just like disappeared. All right.
You did, yeah.
So the main topic for today, I thought was appropriate that it be around faith, freedom, and patriotism. We might not hit each one of those things. We hopefully will. But it's basically how can us as dads in our homeschool environments, whether it be directly teaching our kids or supporting our wives in teaching our kids, how can we help our kids stay informed, do their civic duties, while being grounded in faith?
Yeah.
So that's the topic for today.
Cool.
I could just say, go ahead, Jimmy, talk about it all, but that'd be unfair. So I guess first and foremost, we as fathers, as dads, model everything to our kids. Our kids are like sponges, and they watch what we do, they repeat what we say, whether we're far left, far right, upside down, center, whatever. Our kids model what we say, and you'll find that everywhere you go. There's always somebody growing up, always some kid that will parrot exactly what their parents are saying, whether they know what they're saying or not. So it's important that we are careful on what we say, because even if we are very strongly opinionated in one direction or the other, our kids need to learn the correct way to look at life, and that's through a biblical lens. It's not through our own opinions.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing the level of imprint we have on our children. Where I'm getting older, and and they're having all the creaks and groans when I stand up or sit down, and grunt and whatnot. And I'm realizing just even the other day, like when I clear my throat or I grunt, I'm like, these are the exact same sounds that my dad made my entire childhood growing up. If I heard my dad get up or whatever, and it realizing, I don't think that's the sort of thing that just genetics passed on, that I make the same sounds. It's that the imprintation or the imprinting of being around him, that he was a massive influence on me in my life, and subconsciously modeling myself after him. He's someone I look up to greatly. And so even the things that we aren't intentionally trying to layer into our children's life, they're watching, they're observing, and they are absorbing everything that's going on. So having that realization, I need to be as intentional as I can be, and because they're going to pick up on anything that I've got going on, and that's even just chatting here, it's already convicting. Like, yeah, I can improve. There's areas that I'm sure I could do even better, but just realizing I need to be intentional. And taking this opportunity that I've had this year of being able to be the primary lead learner is kind of the term that we end up using in our home. But being that role in my home, it's quite an undertaking and responsibility, knowing that even when we're sitting down and we're dissecting The Secret Garden and we're reading through that and we're going through what's the motivations and everything, we're doing something intentional with the curriculum. And that's going to leave an imprint. That's going to leave a mark. It's going to have an impact. But even just when we get up in the morning and my wife and I are having just a conversation, the way that we communicate to one another and our children are around, they're not part of that communication, but just the observation that they're going to have, that's still teaching them. They're still learning from something that they are tangentially just present for. And, allowing that to be in the back of your head, that everything that you've got going on in your life, your children are going to be learning. Your children are going to be formed into who they're going to be as an adult, as a young adult, very, very soon. And hopefully that's something that just really starts to challenges my thinking about who I am in my home. And it's not then, I was talking about that authenticity and everything being through a filter. I don't want to be presenting something that's fake for my children and trying to put something forward that it then ends up being a false foundation because I'm just trying to impress them or something, because they're just going to pick up on what naturally and genuine. And the people who are going to know me, the most natural and genuine version of myself, is going to be the people that I live with. And so that's just where we're going with everything in faith and learning through history and everything that's going on these days. How do I naturally engage with it? And that's how it's going to be passed on to them, whether I realize it or not.
So, have you had any of those moments with your kids where you hear a negative trait that you didn't know you were showing, or a negative habit, and they said it or did it? And have you had that realization moment yet?
Oh gosh, I'm guilty of it all the time. Whether or not I realize it, that's probably one of my negative traits, of how self-aware am I?
Oblivious.
Exactly.
Okay, yeah. I mean, there's things every now and then, especially with I'm gonna call my girls out here. They we don't let them watch YouTube shorts for a reason, because I think they're just mindless. Except for my wife's shorts; those are really good on her
The
website.
the doom scrolling.
Yeah, doom scrolling, and
Yeah.
I'm guilty of it. And
Yeah.
I'll waste time, and I'll catch myself and be like, oh, I should do something else.
People's index finger muscle is getting really strong,
I
flipping up
usually
that.
hold my phone at an angle, and I
There you go. Yeah, going for the world record.
but there's been times where you pick up on hearing different things and how they talk, and directly related to who they watch. They absorb that. And like,
Mhm.
what was it last night at the table? My one of my daughters goes, "Dude," I'm just like, "You just call your mom dude?" She's like, "Yeah." It's like, no, you're not doing that.
Yeah.
So it was weird.
I mean, that even just goes to how observant we are as parents. That if there's something like that, a small thing is calling your mom dude, like in
Mhm.
and of itself, doesn't seem like it's that consequential of a thing. But if we ourselves, as dads or our wives, even if we're inundated with our little black
Mhm.
rectangles, if that's where our attention is all the time, and if there's something that, you know what, it was a small thing, call her mom dude, we're not going to do that in our home, and we're going to have a brief conversation about it. We're going to move forward, but we're going to correct it. But if I'm sucked into this, that's going to just blow right past. And then they're taking that as a new learning, like, oh, that's something that is allowed. It wasn't discussed. It wasn't corrected. Then, you know, that's quite the challenge that we have. That my parents, that I've modeled myself after my parents. Man, it's a different uh, adventure for us as parents. Absolutely.
Yeah, I my tactic on correcting that is to overuse in a surfer tone the word dude constantly with her now. I follow her around going dude, dude, calling everything
Yeah, that's
just so
great.
she understands how dumb it sounds. But
Yeah.
it might be the wrong tactic, and my wife probably doesn't like that I do that. But it's fun for me, you know. I'm a
Yeah.
child at heart, so I gotta embrace that as long as I can until I can't remember who I am anymore.
You'll forever be the dude.
The dude. So where are us? Let's keep moving because we're getting off into weird areas here. Let's see. So how? Okay, so in your teachings, how are you incorporating faith-based lessons when you interact with your kids each day, as it pertains to government, civics, and whatnot? Like, how do you do that? Do you just naturally find a book that says, "Hey, you should teach your kids this while you're teaching your kids that"?
You know, coming up with a intentional plan that I'm giving is a stretch and a challenge for me. But we have found some great resources that we enjoy, and we'll sit down and consume them together and then have a follow up conversation after. We love um, the the cartoon that's come out a couple years ago, the Tuttle Twins.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Oh yes, we
who've
love
ever
that
got to
too.
watch any of their stuff, and it's the sort of thing I feel like I could, if I needed to, we could plop them down and they could be entertained for a period of time watching a couple of those, and that's fine to a point. But taking the opportunity to actually intentionally watch with them, and then, okay, let's
Mm-hmm.
have some conversation. What did we engage with, and what did we learn about? But we try to be selective of what we are uh, bringing into the house, that especially if it has a faith component and it has something that's civically minded, that we can try to tackle in a way that stretches our understanding and causes us to ask more questions. That's the best outcome, is when we are even challenged in our own understandings and we're like, you know what, I need to give that a little bit more thought, and I'm not just mindlessly just accepting whatever was fed to me. And I love it when my kids start asking questions. I'm like, yeah, I do need to think about that a little bit more.
So Tuttle Twins, remind me, that's the one with the time traveling granny and her scooter.
Uh huh. Yeah.
Okay,
Uh,
okay.
yeah. That's.
So that one is, it was newer to me. My kids watched tons of episodes. My wife watched episodes with them,
Uh huh.
and they were telling me about it, and I sat down and watched it with them, and I was shocked at the in-depth information they get into. We watched one about the fall of the Berlin Wall,
Yeah.
and I was like, wow. And they're like shooting, like, it's a cartoon, right? But like they
Yeah.
have people shooting bullets at them as they try to cross the wall, and it opens those conversations of like how rough it was in that time period, and like it's a real thing. And I remember some moments in some of these episodes. I can't remember which ones, um, but there were some good conversations that stemmed from those. So Tuttle Twins, definitely a good resource, age appropriate. I mean, my
Yeah.
13-year-old had no problem listening to it, and he thought it was interesting. he wasn't as giddy as like my 6 year old or 11-year old with it, but he still was entertained.
Yeah.
He probably learned something too. Just don't want to admit it because teenagers know everything.
Right. Right. Well, we've even got a series of books that we've been going through. We've been tackling them for a few years. But this, I believe it's only 4 volumes. It's a 4 volume book series called Story of the World. And it's a kind of a history of everything that's happened in every corner of the world since recorded history. So we're now in the modern era of history and tackling everything that's been going on. I think we're around kind of World War One, pre World War One era of what's going on in the world, and it's definitely a superficial glossing over of things that are going on in history, but it gives us that perspective of, okay, your understanding of how the world works, what life is like, is quite different growing up in 2000s United States of America, and being Christians, no less, openly in society. But we're getting to read these stories of what's gone on through history, and we see all these different wars. We see a lot of innocent, terrible things happening to people, challenges that other people had to go through just to even have a meal at the end of the day, the amount of labor and work, and if they would even have a meal. And these are the sorts of stories, and it opens so many questions, but it expands their horizons, expands their understandings of even the current context of where we live and the life that we have. And we've been going through those for the last few years, and that's been a great eye-opening avenue for us to get to explore a lot of that sort of information.
Oh man, we're gonna go so off topic here, and I apologize to the one listener we have right at this
Our
moment.
one fan. Hey,
Our one
Mom.
fan, yeah.
Yeah.
But you got me thinking. I topic is videos about war. Okay, whether educational, probably more entertainment value. I have an interesting viewpoint on
So the
this.
Lord of the Rings extended trilogy.
Absolutely. Actually,
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings is a good series. No
Great.
sex,
Well, yeah.
language, all that stuff is not in there. It's just a bunch of people killing each other with swords and arrows.
Random heads getting chopped up.
Yeah, I
That's
mean that's the blood's blackish. There's not really
yeah,
like
right.
red
Yeah.
splatters of blood. This is orc blood, so it's fine.
Yeah. It's all good.
Yeah, but no, like I'm thinking, I grew up, and I know our upbringing is not always the best scale to weigh our kids' upbringings on, because we've been through a lot different experiences than our kids. We grew up in a different generation. Um, but for example, I grew up very young watching movies like Glory, uh, Battle of Midway, um, Bridge over the River Kwai, Bridge Too Far, all the John Wayne World War II movies. You know,
Yeah.
I'm trying my Memphis Belle, Tuskegee Airmen, all these movies that had different elements that I've always wanted to make sure my kids understand. Oh, Tears of the Sun. They have like a
Yeah.
Japanese internment camp. It's what's the Holocaust one? My mind's blank right now.
Schindler's List.
Schindler's List, yeah, totally
Yeah.
inappropriate for most school age, and there's nudity in it, and
Yeah.
tons of language and violence everywhere. But
Right.
I'm interested on your opinion on these films, and when, if at all, you should show your kids these things from the idea, and my standpoint. Only reason I'm talking like this is to teach them the depravity of war and how bad things could get. I felt that I had more of a patriotic spirit after that. After seeing this, and I was like mad at each side for what they did in those wars, and it was like a learning experience for me, because we've come a long way since then. But without
Hmm.
understanding how bad it was and what happened and what people went through, I feel like I would have lost a lot of the importance of my own freedoms right now.
Right. I mean, same sort of thing. We've kept the absolute goriest things away from our kids. I enjoy those movies and are entertained by them, and I especially like being able to glean historical context and value for my own learning and everything. I mean, one of my favorite books even is Beyond the Band of Brothers. It's Sergeant Dick Winters, his personal memoirs of everything that was going on in the Band of Brothers stories. Like, I love that book, but it's intense and it's very
Yeah.
challenging. I love the Band of Brothers series. Wouldn't watch it with my kids yet. but finding things that can share the story, the history, everything that's going on that aren't necessarily the battles. Like as a guy, like I'm into the battles and
Yeah.
what was going on, the valor, the courage.
Explosions.
Right, yeah. But the courage and having to, you know, sacrifice everything in order
Hmm.
to protect and save the life of someone else. Like those are the things that get my blood going. But we've tackled stories like Corey Ten Boom and The Hiding Place. It was a great historical biography. It's a movie. I think the movie was in the late 70s or 80s. But it's the story of a family that were helping to hide Jews in World War II. And sister, well, I think the whole family ends up getting arrested. Sisters are in a concentration camp together, but even while they're in the concentration camp, you can see God's um, story working out through the lives of these sisters, how they were able to protect the lives of others, even though they weren't Jewish themselves, but they had been protecting Jews. So those were a story that we tackled a few years ago to help put a frame and context into. This is what life was like during World War
Hmm.
II in Europe, in particular, the challenges, the depravity, the absolute horror that families were going through. So finding alternative ways to share the impact of what true history is, the challenges it presents, without having to just go to the Saving Private Ryan route. Which, as much as I love that movie, that's not something
It's a
that
good movie.
it's a really good movie. But being able to, you know, if we're wanting to have an educational homeschool opportunity, let's find something that tells a valuable story and isn't just the exciting blood and guts explosions.
Yeah. No. Okay. Sorry for that segue, but I was just thought about that when you were talking.
That's, yeah,
And you're right. Like looking back at those films, you do see they might not call it out exclusively, but there is you can see God's hand at work in a lot of these situations. And a lot of these films might be based off of true events, and they're just like extraordinary tales of people that went through these experiences. And like, what is it? Anne Frank? Is that that's
yeah,
another example of
I,
that, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's probably a book we'll read eventually in our homeschool journey. I'm hoping we do because I read it growing up and I loved it. So I'm
My
gonna
wife and I, we just watched the new Bonhoeffer movie that
okay.
came out this last summer, but it's we were able to stream it online now, and we didn't know, you know, how intense it might be, and so we wanted to uh, kind of go through it first. But I think we'll probably, at least our older daughter, will probably watch it with her because it wasn't too crazy intense, but really great story, especially of as it concerns what was going on in the faith realm in Europe, and especially in Germany, in particular in Germany, pre World War II, and what that kind of spiritual battle was even like. If anyone who hasn't studied the life and story of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, uh, can't recommend the movie highly enough. Like it was really really well done.
So that was all history. What about current events? How do we, as homeschool dads, how do we take current events and make sure our kids look at it? I don't know if objectively is the right word, but at least seek the truth through the Bible instead of through the media's lens. How do we go about doing that?
Well, first of all, your primary lens needs to be the Bible. Um, so many times it seems like our primary lens that we filter everything through is uh, current media, social media, YouTube, or whatever is in our little black box. It's whatever it's telling us is supposed to be what's important and what's valuable. We end up filtering everything through that. Um, and it takes that intentional, you know what, we're going to have our home and our time centered around faith. We're going to pray together as a family. We're going to read through scripture together as a family. And that's an intentional decision that if it's happening, it's because you chose to have that happen, to be spending time praying together, reading through scripture together. It doesn't just happen by itself. And and so the only way that's going to be the way that you filter current events is by actually doing it. I wish there was a more magic pill answer than that, but that's really the only way it works. And so if you're finding in your home you're struggling with, my children are aware of everything that's going on in the world. They see the news, they see the clips on TikTok now that it's back up again. They hear all these things, whether it's genuine and real stories or someone spinning it just for the clicks. They're absorbing information. How can they have a proper filter of understanding what's going on through the world? Well, the only way you're going to know it and understand it is to be in it, to actually spend time there. And yeah, there's just no other way through it than brute force. You got to be in there. You got to do it, and we got to lead the charge in our homes as husbands and fathers.
That's right. And I will be the first to admit that I have not always done this, and this is kind of a convicting moment for me. I'm going to probably go upstairs and pull up every single news article and then pull the Bible out and start making my kids read it with me right now, and they'll probably be real upset at me. Uh, but I need to do that more. My kids, I think, I'm not sure if don't care, but just not well informed with what's going on around them. Most kids are. They're
Yeah.
oblivious to the world events unless it's like in their face. Mom and dad are glued to the screen and commenting on it. They're really not going to notice it, in
Mm-hmm.
my opinion. Maybe it's different in your household, but my kids care more about Roblox and Minecraft than they do about President Trump getting sworn in to office for a second term. It's just
Right.
not on
Well, I
their
mean,
top list.
growing up, I remember come home from school, and my dad would get home from work. My mom would be putting dinner together, and every single night it was Dan Rather was on the TV, and I saw the news was on every night, and that was just part of my dad's evening routine was watching CBS News with Dan Rather, and so I then knew, like, I remember when the Gulf War
Mm-hmm.
started and all of that. Like I was seeing all of that as it was happening. Anymore, my observation of what's going on in news and current events and everything, it's more I consume it on my own. And so my kids aren't seeing all of the everyday happenings that's going on in the world. We don't have the evening news on, like like growing up, what was on in my house. We don't get the newspaper delivered to my house like we did growing up. We always had the newspaper. So I would I always wanted, the funniest pages. I wanted to go read the cartoons. That was always my section of the newspaper. But I would read other parts and see what's going on in the world. And my kids aren't getting that same experience. So it's up to me to be able to say, this is what's happening in this part of the world. Since we don't have them on social media, they're not getting all of that information. So we do filter, and some level of intentionally, some level unintentionally. It's just the way our home is set up. But yeah, I think even I could do a better job of, this is what's going on in the world, but um, being mindful and selective of how deep we go and what we choose
Mm-hmm.
to spend our time on.
And how we spin it from our own personal opinions as well. It's important to keep the facts straight, and that's about it.
Well, and the
Uh,
hard part, even anymore these days, is knowing what is the
yeah,
facts. Everything's got a spin on it, and I think that's even part of, what, their minds are young, their minds are impressionable. Everything has a spin on it. I'm challenged myself of being able to filter through everything without being spun. So if I'm having a hard time with it, I know they're going to struggle even more, and so I think that's even a bigger part of the reason why we don't let them get too deep in the weeds on a lot of this stuff, because everything's got a spin and it's just hard to decipher what's what.
yeah. And while you're talking, I was thinking back on my childhood of we didn't have the news on, but I remember distinctly. I don't know exactly what year this was, but it'll always be burned in my memory. I was recording on VHS. Remember those things? The big
Oh yeah.
VHS.
Oh
I
yeah.
was
It's
recording VHS a Return of the Jedi special on TV. So all my Star Wars had like the commercials because I recorded them from TV initially, right? And I
You probably had
remember
memorized what commercials
I
specifically
do.
came on at what part of the. Yeah.
Yes, there was like
Yeah.
Tide at one part. I remember a
Uh,
Tide commercial, and it's just it's funny. I don't even know where those are. I probably should ask my parents and see if they still have them because it's kind of like a historical thing in my mind. But there was Bush Senior having a special State of the Union address from the White House saying he's going to give Saddam Hussein 48 hours or something to do what he must do. That was like the famous speech he gave, and I have it on tape on Star Wars: Return of the Jedi. And it cut out some of the movie. I was kind of mad, but you
so if
know,
you're all excited, hey kids, we're gonna watch Star Wars, and this is the version you pull out. Yeah.
yeah, no, that's not. I pull out my now I stream it all. I don't even like pull. I have the collector's VHS from the
Yeah.
the original 456. I have the complete DVD box sets of everything, but I also have the digital of everything just because it's way more convenient nowadays just to
All right.
stream it.
Yeah.
Okay, that was a heck of a segue. Sorry. Um, so there's challenges. Let's see. What? Okay, so obviously back to the for our nation, we as homeschool dads also this is something I'm really guilty of not doing, and I need to start doing a better job of this. Hopefully, this podcast will keep me honest and help me do a lot better things in my dad schooled household. But praying more, praying for everything, good, bad, ugly, praying for our nation's leaders, even if we don't agree with what they're doing, especially if we don't agree with what they're doing, pray, take our concerns before God, and that is where they belong, not in our minds making us worry because we're not supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
It's out of our control anyways. It's
Right.
things are in our control to a certain degree, but overall, the universe is controlled by one person, God.
Right. Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
So, it's going on to challenges we face while we're trying to keep those godly conversations going about our government, our civics, and whatnot in our homeschool. What kind of challenges can we face? Now, I wanted to get to this part really bad because I'm pretty sure I'm going to get a lot of flack for saying this, and it's a stereotype. Um, what type of let's see how to say this right. Uh, would a challenge a homeschool family would face when talking about any kind of civics, government, how it relates to just society in general? Do we have a problem as homeschoolers because we don't get out in the community? Are we sheltered people? Is that a thing?
Well, it's like the meme that's out there of, well, if your kids don't go to public school, then they're not going to fit in with everyone else in society. And
Right.
my answer to that is yes,
Good.
exactly. Yes. Um, yeah. What the world tells us we're supposed to be, and there's that balance of, well, am I just being um, am I sheltering them? Are we being overly protective? And then they're going to be like sheep to the slaughter whenever they do grow up and move out. And that's obviously what we don't want to happen. And so there is that challenge of um,
So there's
there's
truth to that.
aspects,
There's truth
right,
to overprotectiveness and maybe not preparing them correctly. We got to be mindful of that, right?
right. Yeah, I mean, I want them to be prepared when they are an adult, but right now they're not an adult, and so they're under my charge. They're under my care, and so I'm taking that time and that opportunity. That weight is on my shoulders to make sure that they have a grasp of reality as we understand it, and especially through that biblical lens of we're all God's creation, and He created us intentionally, and He wants to know us each individually. And it's not just this random spinning thing out in space that's just born out of absolute chaos. That is just such a depressing view of things. Um, and, uh, and so we pray that when they are older and making decisions on their own, that they come back to those basics that um, we hope and we pray that we were able to instill that in them in a way that they feel personal ownership, and that it has a personal impact on them. And it's not just, well, I'm checking these boxes because that's just what we did in my house. But now that I'm on my own and I get to make my own decisions, that they end up thinking that they're going to do something else. They'll have that freedom, but we pray that the value that we held in our home of let's go to Christ about all things, let's put everything at His feet. That even if it's something that's a challenge, is painful, we feel like it might be harmful. There might be grief associated with something that's going on in our personal life or in the lives of others around us. That uh, still intentionally going to the Lord in thanksgiving and praise because everything is in His hands.
That's right. So obviously, I'm joking when I say our kids are not gonna be prepared. They're not gonna. They're so sheltered because they're homeschooled. It's a common myth for homeschool families because you and I both know there are. My kids do way more in public than I did as a kid. Honestly, like when I was growing up, I was stuck in a classroom, um, with same like-minded, ignorant kids. You know, that's who I grew up with. People of
Yeah.
my own mindset. We didn't know what was going on. We were very opinionated. We talked about this before. Whatever our parents had spewed into our heads, that's what we spewed out to everyone else around us. That's how kids work. And then we were
Yeah.
stuck in classrooms with individuals who maybe had different viewpoints than anybody else around us. And some teachers stood out more than others and had very, bold claims that they would make. And as kids, you accept that as authority because you're in their classroom and they are your master in that class, so you submit to them. And it's important. It's something I really like. I guess maybe I'm just slow and dense, but recently, this past school year, I've really started to understand more and more the importance behind not having that in my kids' upbringing. I like the fact that my wife can teach exact same curriculum, history, math, all language arts. There, my kids are even learning Latin. I didn't learn Latin growing up, uh,
Mm.
but she can teach all these things to them, and give them a biblical foundation to every single thing she teaches them, and it's great to see because I don't know, it's uplifting and it's encouraging for me because I'm really eager to see how they turn out. As weird as that sounds, I'm eager to see what, with a biblical foundation growing up, what kind of people they're going to be versus what kind of person. Because I struggled. I went through public school. I mean, there are great public schools out there. It all depends on your teachers and the circumstances. And it definitely, the kid itself and the parents and how they support their child makes a big difference in how that journey looks. I grew up great. My parents supported me, and I had a very loving household. But my faith journey was very rocky. I conformed early on, and just went with the flow, said the right things people asked me, and I really didn't engage in my faith until my 30s. And that was very much, and at that point, I rejected everything, was an atheist for quite some time. And then I took some very close families and friends coming around me and very much a lot of patience and loving on me, and it took a small church to come together, and they kind of helped guide me toward researching it and not coming on my own like knowledge. I didn't like, it was obviously the Holy Spirit and God leading me the direction, but I mean, they all were definitely led and supported by the Holy Spirit. It was amazing. Not to get into my whole testimony here, but it was amazing, and my kids have a lot better foot up on that than I ever did. They're starting off with the biblical foundation, understanding things more clearly than I ever did. So that's, I think that debunks the whole my kids won't know anything because they're homeschooled.
Right. Yeah.
The end.
Yeah. Yeah. It's exciting to see when they have really cool, insightful, in-depth realizations on things where I could try to think back, like, I don't think I was having that level of insight when I was uh, 13, 12, 8 years old. And I mean, I felt like I was engaged in school. However, I was always the kid in class that my desk was next to the teacher's desk because I oftentimes would finish my homework early and then I didn't have anything to keep me busy, so I would be a distraction to the other kids. Like I was that kid. Like I was just constantly talking and distracting everyone else. I don't think I necessarily like acted
Same.
up or like I wasn't raising hell and like destroying anything. I just kept other kids from being able to focus. And so like I was always the one over there in the corner by myself, like away, sequestered from everyone else, or the teachers would find some random project like, hey Jim, you're going to help with watering all of the plants every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, just to give you something to do. Like it would just be something random like that.
Go
uh
walk the tulips, Jimmy.
yeah, there you go. Yeah, so I came out okay, and I could see a handful of teachers that I can look back and they had a pretty good impact on my life, and I could see where they were people of faith, and as much as they were able to interweave it into their classroom time of bringing Christ into their conversation. I can see sometimes where I had some teachers do that, and I could see other teachers that very much weren't that. But that's part of that. If you're a young parent that has kids getting ready to start the school experience, and you're trying to determine if I'm going to homeschool or I'm going to public school or private school or whatever, of knowing, okay, my kids are going to a different teacher every year,
Mm-hmm.
and when they get older, they're going to multiple teachers throughout the day for each different subject. It really turns into a crapshoot. I mean, you're rolling roulette of who your child is going to be sitting in front of, and if you're not setting them up with a strong foundation, you're not intentionally giving them a filter of how to observe the world through a biblical lens, then who knows what kind of influence they're going to end up succumbing to.
Yeah, and like I said before, as much as I'm 110% for homeschooling, I'll give a pitch to the other families that do it correctly, uh, with the right support and the right biblical background, a strong Christian faith. Your kid can survive in public school, um,
Absolutely.
but it's more difficult. The odds are against them, obviously, because everyone's telling them what to conform to, and they have to be that light in the dark room, which is good, and it can be good, and there's great success stories from that. Um, but I, for one, am happy that we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Same here.
So we're getting close on our time here. I actually have to work for a living, so I gotta get to my full time job after this. What kind of tips can we give dads to help support their either their wives who homeschool, or what tips can we give dads who do the homeschooling uh, to add any kind of historical, um, biblical references? What resources? What different activities can they do? Um, Maybe a couple tips you have. I don't know. I have a couple examples. When we go first.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so I was thinking, growing up in high school, I know we did like the debate class. I thought that was a pretty cool concept. And it's something I think when we get to more of a civics lesson in our school, we might have already passed it. I might have missed it, but I might bring it back up again to my wife and say, hey, let's do a mock debate and bring some topics up. And it's a good skill for our kids to have. And you can debate different current event topics, and that leads down the path of researching those. You have the opportunity to open up the Bible alongside it and see what the Bible says about these topics. So I think that's a good kind of activity you can plan with your kids. Um, and in doing so, you can also kind of say, hey, this is what the media is saying about this. Let's see if it's true. And you can kind of fact check the media and make that another lesson with your kids on how to think critically and not be just a drone, you know?
Yeah, I think it's a challenge this week is how can you find at least one opportunity a day where you are having an intentional connection, where you are face to face, eyeball to eyeball with your kids, talking about something of importance and value, whether it's important and valuable to them, um, or something that you notice that's important and valuable to you, but you are having a face-to-face eyeball intentional conversation, and deliberate. And that would just be a good challenge this week for anyone to have that connection with their kid, whether
Yeah.
it's over your favorite sports team or what's going on in current events, national the national stage, international stage.
Man, good job catching us at the end there. We didn't talk about sports at all this entire podcast until you just mentioned that. So, you saved us from not being a true guy podcast. I
Yeah,
mean, it
yeah.
might be the only reference we ever have, but at least we
Uh-huh.
have it. So, good job.
Right. Yeah.
All right, so we gotta wrap this up. Everyone can catch episodes on YouTube. That's where our primary source of these episodes are going to be housed. I'm going to try to get them on other sources, and I'll list them on our website, dadschooledpodcast.com. Like, subscribe, do all the fun things. Any closing thoughts, Jimmy, before we close up? Oh yeah. Oh, sorry. Next episode, which should be hopefully next week if we can get our schedules coordinated, is going to be embracing winter.
Uh-huh.
So definitely log in to see how we talk for 45 minutes to an hour about embracing winter.
Yeah. Yeah.
It should be entertaining.
Yeah. I look forward to it.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for joining, Jimmy. Thanks for joining our one viewer, mom, Jimmy's mom. Hi, Jimmy's mom.
Yep. I'm on.
And then remember, always you're a leader of your household. You're the dad, the father figure. You're the cornerstone of your household. You need to keep the faith, love your family. You need to enjoy the freedom the homeschooling brings. That's why we do it. It brings so much more freedom than anything else out there.
That's right. Absolutely.
All right. Take care.
Yeah.